So this latest episode of Tower of God, the tension and just the escalation, it goes from 0 to 100 really quick. You pretty much start the episode off by seeing one of the obstacles in this test just have a character dead in his mouth, feet dangling lifeless, and then you end the episode with probably one of the best cliffhangers Tower of God has seen to date, where you have the two princesses, one of which is given the option, hey, take her out for your own freedom, and you're just kinda sitting there, arms crossed, thinking, you don't think she would do this to our girl Nock, but at the same time, it's Tower of God, and survival of the fittest is kind of a big theme for everyone other than Bam, and you don't actually know where the cliffhanger wants to go, and you're just thinking, bless Tower of God, because it is exceptional at what it does. And one thing I want to just kind of touch upon before we get into some of the meatier content of this episode is a detail that I feel like a lot of us aren't giving enough credit to when it comes to the world and just how it's been visualized in this anime adaptation. That's just the details to pretty much everything from characters to the world and the little pieces surrounding them that make it honestly feel full of life as if it's a real living and breathing environment. Every time I look at an episode of Tower of God, I'm taken back by how much detail is put into the character designs, not even just the front and center characters like Rack and things like that, but just the random characters you'll see in the background or the random creatures you'll see in the background. The amount of grotesque and disturbing imagery that we see that's not something there to just say, oh, this is going to kill you. It's just like, we're in Tower of God. There's a lot of things that are not going to look earthly, and in doing so, it makes a new environment just pop, as if you see these worms going through the sand, you see these creatures, these abominations that are like guardians of the test. It just feels like every creature has a unique design that doesn't make them feel like, oh, it's another humanoid character or it's an animal character, but rather it's something from Tower of God's universe, and you don't know what that is, whether it's friend or foe, which is why when you get characters like Ren, you're looking at them at a visual level, you're like, this could be the comfiest of pillows or something that's going to shoot snake-like monsters out of its mouth and try to kill you, and you never know what you're going to get until you get it, unless there's been dialogue to set up something, and even then it could be a red herring. I love what they're doing with this, just the set pieces, the scenery, just there's so much to it that I never look at Tower of God and say, anime set piece, anime character design. What I say is like, this is a world not like our own, and the amount of detail and just like the visual details are exceptional. Obviously the script and the dialogue is doing wonders at building a history full of like, oh, the princess hierarchy, this king and all that. There's a lot of really great story details, but just at a visual level alone, it feels like a real world, and it's adding a lot of details that really makes Tower of God flare and pop out every single week, and it's something I definitely want to praise because I don't think I've done so enough. And episodes like these where you're seeing just so many different set pieces, from underwater to caves to just the sandy desert locations, they're doing wonders at what they're accomplishing here, and honestly, it's something that deserves a lot of praise because it's some of the best visual directing in terms of like giving a lot of life to its world that I've seen in quite a few anime seasons. That's saying a hell of a lot, I know. Something I definitely enjoy about the tests in general is how off-putting it is when you take into consideration Bam and Rachel pretty much have to do nothing, as all the other characters are basically doing all the work. And you kind of think to yourself, what's going on here? Like, why would the people who kind of like challenged this test, who looked to a giant whale-looking creature who said, hey, let me do this, but then you kind of think to yourself, well, Rachel's in a wheelchair. This test probably wasn't really designed for that in mind, the people who can't walk around. But at the same time, when you take into consideration how the test ends and how it's basically designed to lure the princesses and take out basically the trash of the tower, as the director is thinking and saying, it's really interesting to me. Especially when you consider like what everyone is saying about just like the regulars and irregulars, because every character besides Bam pretty much had to have so much put on their shoulders, so much burden to accomplish things, especially the princesses, and how they had to work their way up, they had to train, they had to do all these things in order to be chosen by the tower. And then you have a character like Bam who never had to have that weight on his shoulders, so as he's surrounded by all this death and despair, yes, he can get sad or mad, but that's why he can come back to Rachel after being betrayed, or look at characters who potentially could betray him and just see the good in people, because he hasn't had that burden placed on his shoulders the same way they have. Which is why I can understand completely why the tower doesn't like people like Bam, because they didn't suffer in the same way, which in doing so makes him view the tower in a way that most likely the tower doesn't want to be viewed, because you want to fear the tower, you want to be in such a state that you want to betray people so you can reach the top. It's a very, you want to almost say toxic environment, but it's something of more of like survival of the fittest, which kind of goes hand in hand with toxicity, just with how certain characters want to achieve their goals, looking at Rachel in particular. But to have a character like Bam who wants to be friends with people because he really hasn't had that same wake-up call or same life that these have, unless maybe something similar did happen to him before he met Rachel, we don't know at this point in time. It gives him a really interesting, it's like this juxtaposition compared to everyone else, which is why it's really understandable why not only characters want to push back against Bam's ideology, but also want to follow it, because it's such a beacon of hope that you think he's clueless, he's dense, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he's just a child, because how could someone want to be friends with someone who wants to kill you? But then at the same time, they're probably thinking, I need some positivity in my life, and maybe this character can do something for this, and it's just such an interesting contrast to everyone surrounding them. And even though they really were just sitting in a bubble for this episode, there's some nice dialogue between him and Rachel and just what's happening surrounding, because you would look at this monster and then you go back to this conversation that there's no threat in any way, shape, or form until they get swallowed by the monster. But it's really nice to see all that content and think about what their relationship and Bam in particular represents in the world and cast of characters of Tower of God. In terms of just the combat and what was happening, I thought it was really cool. I mean, there's that one guy who threw the spear, and apparently that's like, oh my god, you ruined the plan, and that's why everyone's just shocked and kind of pissed off. But in any other series, you know, kind of protecting your ally would be considered being a hero, just maybe the scaredness, I guess, kind of like lowers the hero level and maybe kind of ruins the plan, but still the plan feels like it was falling apart pretty quickly considering this giant monstrosity was being controlled by, I don't want to say it was a cute character design, but it was a pretty fluffy sheep-like character design. You don't really think it's going to be all that evil until you start hearing him talk, which is something else. What I really like about like the princess content in particular is how I love how these two characters you think hate each other and are just going to try to kill each other, especially considering that battle they did have, but now are more so rivals than anything else. They're always together, they're always competing against one another, they want to beat the other, and they make bets in the middle of basically facing off against a demon straight from Satan's hell pit. And I love how you can have these moments where they're just like, hey, every 5 minutes we'll switch and we'll see who beats them first. If I win, I get your swords. If you win, I'll be your servant for life. And I'm thinking, hot damn, this is a insane bet. You think neither one of them are going to win because it just feels like it would ruin the relationship that they're kind of blooming, where it is this rivalry, and it's honestly incredibly fun to me. But then you just start seeing it get progressively worse and more intense. And I mean, you start off with our boy who, he kind of is like the type of character, it kind of becomes like a meme. You're like, you know, people walking into 2020 thinking things are going to be all swell and good. He's ready to jump and stab, and you're like, you got this. And then it's people leaving 2020 just hoping 2021 will be so much better because he regrets his actions in every way, shape, and form. And I love how they did incorporate some humor at the appropriate moments, which honestly Tower of God's done great across the board. There's a lot of dramatic. I mean, you literally end the episode with saying, hey, kill her, and basically I'll let you walk free, which you know that ain't gonna happen. But still, there is comedy in this episode when facing off against some of the grossest monsters we've seen in this anime to date, and some of the grossest monsters you're going to see in this anime season. And that's not just because there's a lack of competition from not a lot of anime airing, it's really solid character designs, and you understand why characters would shit their pants in the face of characters that just are drooling and like wanting to eat you, and just they're doing some pretty crazy shit. But to see just like how it gets progressively more unnatural, because you're looking at the character design, you're like, yeah, that's disturbing, it's horrible. But then you start realizing what's happening and how they lure you into the cave, and you're seeing characters who were honestly doing exceptional be basically bondaged all up, and then you see characters getting progressively so mad when they realize that this character might have killed her mother, and it's like, oh my god, like what's going on here? There's so much, it's horrible, it's horrifying. You feel like every single time a character responds to something, in a lot of ways, it's similar to how the viewer's feeling outside of maybe certain comedy scenes and what characters are saying, but the face of horror and defeat and this lust for revenge at certain points, it feels like you get inside these characters' head as if you felt this your entire life, despite us only knowing these characters for now 11 episodes. I'm really not sure what it is about Tower of God's character writing, but it's something that it just makes you feel like, despite not knowing these characters for all too long, and despite a lot of these characters sharing the spotlight with a pretty large assortment of characters across the board, it feels like when they're alone or when they're interacting with certain characters, you just feel like you've known them for so long, and it feels like their characterization is just tight across the board, despite a lot of them not really having an arc as of yet to actually grow and evolve, but based on how they interact, their initial personalities, whether they match your own criteria of what's a fun personality or a personality that just rubs you the wrong way, you still feel like they're a person that believes in things, and you think that they deserve to be at the spot they're at in terms of the tower's points of view. We've seen characters fail, we've seen characters die, and they're doing a great job at really just capturing this mysterious aura with the hierarchy of the tower and these directors, and just like what is going on with like guardians and things like that. Why do you hate the princesses so much? What is at the top of the tower that really you want to take certain characters out before they get there? And who is truly behind the mastermind here? Like, who is manipulating all these strings? Because it doesn't feel like we've even scratched the surface of the conspiracy, which adds on to the hierarchy of this like political system, which is so intriguing. And what is Bam going to represent in terms of shattering or potentially, you know, being tossed aside before he can even really disrupt the flow that this tower is known for so many years. What I like about this episode is it definitely had its funny moments. There are some great Rack moments, like him wanting to get up and he's full size again, and he gets said, hey, if you don't want to be turned short again, you might want to calm down. And I love certain moments like that. It is so cute and adorable, considering that this is a character who used to toss characters around just with a flick of his finger, and now gets thrown into a chibi form that he gets picked up as if he's a little bratty toddler, and it's hilarious. The comedy definitely never feels distracting in Tower of God, but rather it's a good debriefing, as if you kind of let out a sigh of relief at the sight of just like, okay, we're not super dramatic, let's get a distressor here before we jump back into the craziness that is the Tower of God's world and just its character arcs in general. And I don't know exactly what's going to happen with that cliffhanger, because as much as I want to say she's not going to kill her, at the same time, what we've seen with Tower of God is that when characters' backs are pushed against a wall, they will take care of themselves first before they take care of others. But at the same time, you want to think, well, Bam's recruited such an assortment of characters that maybe they wouldn't do that and they would hold out on hope, because it honestly feels like a 50-50 split on what that cliffhanger is going to do. And that's how you know you've done something exceptional, where it doesn't feel like, oh, because these are main characters or they're main supporting characters, they have to live. We see characters literally bloody and bruised and broken and die. Look at Ho in particular. He could have been a character very relevant for a long time. Characters can die, and the fact that they can die makes it so you don't want to say, I'm going to put all my money on black here. No, you say red has an equal chance at winning in terms of this roulette table, and that's a really fun feeling. Tower of God did great this week. I'm really excited to see how the season's going to wrap up and how the first little story arc is going to conclude and set in motion for its second one. But as always, let me know your thoughts and opinions, be it for fans of the source material or anime originals, down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.